So again, this is something that we want to do every Saturday night at the same time, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Because a lot of us, we're connected through social media and of course through that group and being posts and whatnot. And Craig, I'm getting a lot of feedback from you.
Okay, what do I need to do?
Perhaps maybe, do you have me like on the speakers? Maybe turn them down just a little bit.
You got it.
But yeah, and so and you're not hearing any feedback from me, are you?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. So what we want to try to do is just be able to let people see us. You know, yeah, we can look at pictures and whatnot, but why not talk to each other and just brainstorm on what we can do to inform more people about the very fact that slavery was never abolished in the 21st century here in the United States, and that they are still practicing slavery through the prisons, through private prisons, through the state prisons, through the federal government. So yeah, you said that you have some questions, Greg.
Well, yeah, and I can give an update about what happened today too, if you'd like. So just let me know when the right time is.
Yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to hear updates from people, you know, of what they have been doing in terms of abolitionism, any victories, any defeats, you know, just suggestions, whatever.
Well, you know, I don't know that I would say that it was a victory or anything like that, but today I was invited along with the rest of a local group called Freedom Fighters to go to Greenville, South Carolina, to a community center to meet Reverend Jesse Jackson and attend kind of to be background people for a press conference that he was going to do. And he gave a presentation and talked about a variety of issues, and one of the primary things that he wanted to focus on was the idea that people should know more about the Emancipation Proclamation, and he said that it's the most thing in the history of African people, as far as he's concerned, certainly at least Africans in the United States. Then he finished with his presentation, and we began eating dinner. I was sitting close to him, and I told him that that I couldn't let the opportunity go by without asking him about the exception clause in the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is or what we're talking about there, this is basically the section of the 13th Amendment that says that if a person has been quote unquote duly convicted, and we all know how difficult that is to happen even today, imagine how much easier it was to do 150 years ago, that as long as a person has been duly convicted, they can continue to be enslaved. And that is in fact what is happening today. People who are imprisoned are continuing to be enslaved. And so I said, you know, I can't let the opportunity to go by without mentioning this to you. So he then went on to have a press conference that, like I say, we were there to be partly to be backdrop for, and he brought the subject up at the press conference and specifically mentioned that people are. He said that it's peonage is the word that he used. And now I don't think that the local press, and there were no national press there, I don't think the local press caught on to it. I don't think they noticed it, but I did. And you know, part of the reason that this group was there was because Jesse Jackson is a well-known person, especially in Greenville, where he's from. And if we can, I don't want to say use or take advantage of, but I mean, if we have shared goals, then why not make sure that he hears our voices? So whenever anyone, I mean, in the last 3 months, I've had an opportunity to meet both him and Cornel West. I didn't feel a need to really bring it up to Cornel West because I know it's at the tip of his tongue. But you know, I mean, if I can meet these guys, anybody can. They're all over the place. I mean, you know, they travel. So even if you're in a small town in some other state, eventually you're probably going to have a chance to see one of these high-profile people and get to them and say, you know, this is an issue I want you to be thinking about.
Let me ask you a question. Two questions there. Have you ever heard Cornel West? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I saw him at.
No, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Have you ever heard Cornel West specifically mention the exception clause in the 13th Amendment? Have you specifically heard him say that slavery was never abolished?
No, I just assumed he knew that.
See, we shouldn't assume, Greg. You know what I'm saying? We should not assume. We should bring these things.
You're right.
Yeah, we should bring these things up. But I want to take it back to what you said about Jesse Jackson. Thumbs up for taking that opportunity. You're exactly right. If we can get high profile, quote unquote, showcase people who, you know, have access to these media platforms where they reach millions of people, if we can convert them into real abolitionists and get them to specifically mention the 13th Amendment and that, you know, slavery was never abolished, then, you know, that is an asset to the movement. You know, whether we want to use language like we're using them or whatever, hey, I'll use anything I can, whatever language they want to use. I'll use whoever if it's going to end slavery in this country. You know, whether that's using a person, whether that's using resources, whether that's using a platform like Blab that we're on now to spread the abolitionist movement. We gotta use everything. Now, he played a trick on you, and he played a trick on the public. I just looked up see, this is why we tell people, and you know, you're a regular listener of New Abolitionist Radio, you're a contributor in our group, Move to Abolish 21st Century Slavery. And we talk about it's not mass incarceration, it's slavery, it's a continuation of slavery. Call it what it is, because mass incarceration is like politically correct language that does not really describe the horrors that people are facing on these plantations, whereas slavery, you know, would describe all the things that we heard about that happened on slave plantations, people being beat, people being raped, you know, children, all of that is going on today on these, what we call prison plantations, you know, and so, but we also tell, and Max, I don't think Max is able to join us tonight because of his issues, you know, with internet connectivity and whatnot. But Max has often said, stop using metaphors. It's not sort of like slavery. It's not, you know, and all that type of stuff. We're not talking about debt slavery. That's something totally different. You know, a person who's in debt still has the freedom to run around and hide from their creditors. Whereas a person who's a slave who is enslaved is in a cell and in a confined area where other people have control of their bodies 24/7. So it's not student debt, it's not slavery. Credit card debt is not slavery. Low wages is not slavery. There is real slavery that's going on, and so, you know, we try to tell people, be careful about the language that people are using, because it makes you think the chattel slavery, and all chattel slavery means is a human being is a piece of property. Okay.
Correct.
And are not prisoners property of whatever facility they are here. So we still have chattel slavery. So this is the definition of peonage. Now, what did you say Jesse Jackson said? What was the language he used?
He did, in fact, say that these people were being paid $4 a day, which amounted to peonage.
All right. This is what peonage.
And I do realize fully, and we do too, that there are people who would be paying literally nothing.
Right.
And what difference does it make if, I mean, once again, truly care if they're being paid $1 million a day. If they don't have the freedom to get up and walk the hell out the door, they're enslaved.
Right.
Now, if they're being forced to do that labor, how much they're being paid is irrelevant.
Now, I just typed in peonage into the Google search engine, and this is what came up.
Okay.
What's being highlighted is PBS, excerpt from PBS.org. It says slavery versus peonage. So at least PBS is recognizing there's a difference between the two, even though I haven't went to this post to look at it. But this is the excerpt that was pulled from it. Peonage, also called debt slavery or debt servitude, is a system where an employer compels a worker to pay off a debt with work legally. And it says legally peonage was outlawed by Congress in 1867. Now, we could say they're trying to bring back peonage when they're trying to make enslaved persons pay for their stay.
And that actually is specifically the point that he made, was that their wages have been confiscated from them to pay for their room and board. And we agreed that this is wrong because it denies that income to the inmate's family, and they still have needs. Just because someone's incarcerated doesn't mean the people left at home don't still have financial needs. But you're exactly right. What he was saying, what he was doing was he was comparing actual slavery with debt slavery.
Right. And I'm glad he did bring that up, but I don't think he fully understood where you were coming from and pointing it out that, no, this is slavery. It was never abolished. That's why that was the whole point of bringing up the exception clause in the 13th Amendment, which most people have never read. And you know, just using trying to be grammatically correct. If I say I'm abolishing something, but then I say except for, well, then I'm not grammatically correct if I say I abolished it, did I? I mean, if I the way that I think of abolishing something, it's gone. It's done away with. That's the end of it. So,
Scotty?
Yes.
Didn't you ever see that movie? What is it, The Princess Bride? There's dead and then there's mostly dead.
No, I haven't seen that movie, but point taken. But you know,
I mean, you're exactly right. There's this word game is something that's a common principle, and it applies not just to this slavery issue, but to the way that they talk to us all the time about whatever. I even fall into using deceptive words because they just surround us all the time, and so, you know, when he said peonage, it didn't even occur to me that he was talking about debt. And I mean, I wouldn't have corrected him in front of the press anyway, but you're exactly right. I thought he had a full and complete understanding of what I was telling him, and I don't think now that he really did. So I want to try to see if I can't touch bases with him again.
Now, but he does bring up an important aspect. Now, because of the exception clause of the 13th Amendment, which allows forced slavery as punishment for crime, then that means that what the private prisons are doing is totally legal under the Constitution. That means what the states are doing, because on our last program, we talked about, I think it was in the 1990s, California, the state of California had $150 million in sales related to prison slave labor. Okay, so that's legal per the Constitution. That's all legal.
Oh, yeah.
But when he is right in saying that peonage, they're trying to bring back peonage when you're making prisoners pay for their stay. That means you're putting them in debt by charging them for their stay, which, I mean, isn't that already what the taxpayers are? That's why you're taking taxpayer money to pay, to cover all of that, to pay for the facility. So it's like they're trying to double dip, okay? But he is right in saying that, okay, this is, well, I don't know if he said it was illegal or not, but that practice that we are starting to see these politicians talk about was actually outlawed by Congress in 1867. So they're talking about violating the law because that peonage has been outlawed. And y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't you call that peonage when you're making a prisoner pay for room and board, quote unquote?
Well, it certainly sounds that way to me, but I mean, I don't know anything about the law. I mean, I know what I can read, and when I read it, it's clear language to me. Like the 13th Amendment, it's really not at all confusing. It's very straightforward there. You just read the words and you can follow it. But I don't, I'm just constantly shocked that people will find ways to dance around the stuff that to me just seems perfectly obvious.
I don't know if you had an opportunity to catch the last broadcast, but Johanna,
I did not. My iTunes isn't working properly.
Okay, but Johanna had been debating with someone on Facebook about this sort of amnesty thing for traffic tickets that was happening in Detroit, and apparently this attorney was on Facebook and was criticizing the people who were standing out in the cold, complaining about the code, when he was saying they should be grateful for, this amnesty. Okay. But if I'm cold, I'm going to say I'm cold. That's neither here or there. You know what I'm saying? But I asked him before he left, he's an attorney, a licensed attorney who's practicing law, as he has a private practice as well as he gets referrals from the state as a public defender. He doesn't work for the public defender's office. I guess he's taking these cases. What do they call that? It's a specific terminology that they use for that.
Pro bono?
Pro bono work, I guess, And so he is practicing in the law. So we asked him, we read the 13th Amendment to him. I didn't say anything about it, not abolishing slavery or anything like that. I just read it to him. And then he didn't answer right away. I said, well, let me read it again so you can make sure you heard me clearly. And then so I read the entire text of the 13th Amendment again. And I said, based on the text that I just read you, what do you take from that? And so he was pretty stumped. He didn't know, even though, like you said, it's straightforward language. And then you would think they would study that in law school, but I never attended law school, so I don't know if they ever read the Constitution in law school. So then when I told him, I asked him, does that language that of the 13th Amendment that has to do with so-called abolishing slavery, does it actually abolish slavery? And so then he was like repeating the words, and then he said, except. And it was like you could see he was catching on. He was catching that except, that word except. And then so he had to acknowledge that slavery was never abolished. And I think he was kind of in shock. Okay. Now we do have people out there who I think are being deliberately deceptive, like the people in Congress who had that ceremony commemorating the 150th year of the passage or the ratification of the 13th Amendment. But like when we went to House Speaker Ryan's website, well, how are you going to talk about the 13th Amendment and you're going to have this big ceremony with all these, other politicians, the President of the United States and other honored persons, but you don't even list the text of the 13th Amendment. See, I believe they're being deceptive, purposely deceptive. And I did a YouTube video about a year or so ago where they were talking about the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. And they were talking about the 13th Amendment. The YouTube video is still up. So I went through all of these articles. It was about maybe 6 or 7 articles. And they would say, slavery and involuntary servitude shall be abolished, et cetera, without putting the rest of the text. And so to me, you're being deliberately deceptive, because if you weren't intentionally being deceptive, well, it's not like it's 100 words. It's only about 30 words. Why wouldn't you publish the entire text? So I think that there are two types of people when you confront them with the 13th Amendment. Those who are informed about it and are being deceptive, and therefore they're not going to admit it. All right. And then you have the people like us who we went to school, we've seen all these movies about the Civil War, and we heard all these stories about slavery being abolished. And then when we hear that text, it doesn't resonate or it doesn't register right away, because we got to fight through that programming that we've been programmed with all our lives, that slavery has been abolished. And so I think that for some people is what is cognitive dissonance. Is that the proper use of that word or that term, cognitive dissonance? In that they're just unable to grasp the fact that they've been lied to and slavery was never abolished. Okay,
my computer seems to be
so you're getting triple
wobbling back and forth on me.
Let me turn down my speakers.
I'm
using external speakers. That's why I was asking you. I can still hear you.
But that's okay.
Go ahead and speak.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm still hearing myself 3 times. Well, do you mind if I ask you a quick question about this technology? I have the link to this on Facebook.
They have to click it to find us.
Will this show up on Facebook, or just the link and they'd have to click it to find us here? Okay.
4.
Good enough. Good enough. Now, we can get as many as 3 people involved in this conversation at the same time? 4. Outstanding. Well, I hope that somebody else, I know there's other people over there. I hope that some of y'all will join us. If you've got the TV and, I'm sorry, the webcam and the Twitters.
You may have some issues when you first call, like Greg was having some issues, but, if it's your first time using anything, you got to figure, the stuff out, and hopefully you'll get it resolved. But we would love for any of you who are watching us now, if you have any questions about what we're talking about. And what we're talking about is that slavery was never abolished. The 13th Amendment has an exception clause, and that, all of these corporations, the states, the federal government, like I was telling this guy the other day, go to unicorn.gov and you will see that the federal government owns a corporation that uses prison slave labor to produce all kinds of products and services, and they also contract out to other corporations to use this prison slave labor. So, slavery was never abolished, and that's what we're trying to get across to people, and we're trying to start a new abolitionist movement. That's why we call the radio program New Abolitionist Radio, because we are new abolitionists. Let me see if we got a question. Okay, it's saying you might have to use a headset. He might be talking to you. Thank you, Monty Henry. He says, have you broken a federal criminal law lately? Who knows? No one has been able to count them all. And so what he's talking about is the all the different, what would we call them, codes and ordinances that get passed into law.
50,000 different laws. 50,000 different laws in the United States. And it's almost impossible to go through a day without breaking some law. Imagine this. I truly, this is the sort of thing that can happen to someone. Imagine that you go into an antique store and you see an attractive piece of art, and it's like a collage thing, and it's got some rope on it, and it's got some flowers on it, and some feathers and some buttons and whatever like that. And you take it home and you hang it on your wall, and son of a bitch, if that feather isn't an eagle feather, you have broken a federal law and completely have no idea. And I'm not suggesting that means that they're going to bust your door down and haul you off to prison, But if somebody's got it out for you, that's the kind of thing that can make you a target. They can take advantage of any opportunity like that to go after somebody. There are so many laws out there, plus they specifically target laws, people that they want to bust. If you want to have a lot of black youth in prison, then make it illegal to wear saggy pants if saggy pants are popular. Make it illegal to listen to music loud if they like to listen to loud music. Whatever it takes
wearing certain colors
to get more people into the prison system.
Because actually, you know why that's not a law? Where I live, when my oldest daughter was in middle school, the principal tried to send her home and tell her she can't wear the color pink. And that was her favorite color, was pink, which is a lot of little girls' favorite color is pink. So, but apparently some clique of girls who, let's just call them juveniles, who were getting in trouble or whatnot, those were their colors that they chose, was pink. Well, so why should my daughter be penalized because other people wearing pink? You know what I'm saying? But now that's the school administrator. That's the school with an unwritten rule just trying to ban my daughter. But obviously, you know, I went up there and I told that principal, you will not be trying to tell my daughter what colors she can wear. And But in some cities, some towns, they have actually passed ordinances outlawing colors. And so you may be from out of town. You may be from out of town. And you don't know, and you go, hey, I'm putting on my red shirt and I'm gonna walk to the store. Right. Well, next thing you know, you getting a ticket and a fine because of this law, this ridiculous law. So you're right. And then, like, you know, many of these laws are actually unconstitutional, in my opinion. You know, like when we look at the drug laws, which we know that is contributing to why we see so many people today in prison. Let's not even go down the road of whether it's moral or not for somebody to use drugs. But in a free society, you shouldn't be able to force your sense of morality onto me, as long as what I'm doing isn't harming another individual. Okay, and so that is what was used. Okay, 3 strikes laws. You know, now we got Clinton out there admitting we put too many people in prison, you know, and so now they're talking about reforming and stuff. And so that's how easy it is for somebody to become enslaved in this country through these laws. And Monty Henry is exactly right. And we thank him for bringing up that point is, do you know how many laws are on the books? Let's see. Monty Henry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's saying unicorn.
I'll lean over here with my glasses on, read the little thing on the side, and then realize.
Federal prison industry, a wholly owned, self-sustaining government corporation that sells market price services and quality goods made by inmates. Now, you look at the unemployment rate that's out there. Isn't it awful interesting that certain demographics or people who live in certain geographical areas, that they can't find a job or you know, but yet if they get locked up, oh, they'll certainly be put to work. It's just ridiculous, man.
Yeah, we'll find a job for you, even if it's behind bars. You know, it's all right. So the profit motive, once again. All right, I want to talk about 2 things. The profit motive is not all it takes for prison slavery or for slavery. If a person is behind bars, can't control where they go, and paid or unpaid is forced to work, they are enslaved. And just because they're being enslaved by the government doesn't make it any better than, you know, or a government agency like Unicorn obviously doesn't make it any better than being enslaved by the government and then being used by McDonald's. The other thing was that you mentioned reform, and that's one of the things that I think that those of us who are involved in the new abolitionist movement are really clear on is that there is no such thing as reform for slavery. You know, it's just not something that you can reform. It's not with. I mean, you can't make it more gentle. You can't make it more tender. You can't. Like I say, it doesn't matter how much the pay is. It's just not acceptable to tell a person that they will be punished if they don't go to work. It's not fair to tell them that they will suffer additional punishments or longer punishments for refusing to go to work when they're already incarcerated. Their freedom has already been taken away from them. And there's just no room for compromise on that. To my way of thinking, it's just not something that you can negotiate.
Slavery by Another Name. Slavery by Another Name first was a book. I can't remember the author's name. I've reached out to him to try to get him to come on New Abolitionist Radio. I haven't heard back from him yet. But it is also a documentary that was aired on PBS. You can also find it probably in its entirety on YouTube. And I tell everybody to watch that. Slavery by Another Name. Right after the Civil War, and these so-called enslaved Africans were so-called emancipated, then that's when they passed the black codes, all these laws, you know, that they put on the books and specifically targeted the formerly enslaved African with, and then put them in prison, and even including children back then. And then they were leased back out to either those farms or plantations they came off of, or to the railroad industry. Have you ever seen this movie? It's a cable show that I used to watch. Man, I can't think of the name of it now, but it's about the Old West and building the railroad. And the actor Coleman Meaney used to be on one of the Star Trek. Hell on Wheels. Hell on Wheels. Have you heard of Hell on Wheels? If you watch Hell on Wheels,
Star Trek.
What the television series was, a cable series called Hell on Wheels is about the two different railroad companies competing with each other to get government contracts and see who's going to reach whatever point first. Well, all the black people, all the black railroad workers were out there working on lease from the prisons, and I only picked that up once in one of the episodes when I figured out, you know, oh, these guys are in prison. And the book Slavery by Another Name, also in the film, shows this, that a lot of enslaved prison labor built the railroads, rebuilt the country, especially the South, after the Civil War, what they call the Reconstruction period. That was still used with the very people the war was fought to so-called free these people. Then they passed the black codes, duly convict them, and now they're back out there working for the very same people, you know, that was enslaving them before. It's just ridiculous, people, and it's hidden in plain sight if you look and open up your eyes.
When you saw, I can't think of the name of it.
Well, you saw the movie, oh shoot, I can't think of the name of it. Shawshank Redemption. And the what's it called? The head of the prison, warden, right? He was corrupt, and he was hiring out his prison employees to for-profit businesses, and other for-profit businesses that weren't hiring the prison employees were not able to compete. So they went to him, complained, and he said, well, you know, here's an empty envelope. If it wound up with some money inside of it, I might shut down my program and require a payment every month to make sure that that continued to happen. Well, we've got to constantly be looking for allies. And even if they're not really allies that we want to associate ourselves with for the long haul, we can associate ourselves with them while we're dealing with this particular issue. And an example of what I'm talking about is drive down the the interstate, and you will see people, at least in South Carolina, with a porta toilet on the side of the interstate and a security guard out there with a shotgun and inmates collecting up garbage off the side of the road. Now, I know that they do that, number one, to grin the faces of the poor and to make people feel like crap about themselves. They do it to humiliate people. And they also do it so that Joe average taxpayer can feel good about punishing those prisoners. So what we perhaps, like I say, as part of the picture, what we need to do is when we see things like that happening, see who in private business might fill that same role, and then go to them and say, why should you have to compete against imprisoned people for the contract to clean up the side of the highway? Why shouldn't you have a right to as a free man, if you will, pursue that business, pursue that contract without having to compete against enslaved people?
They do that here in North Carolina. Matter of fact,
you know what I'm saying, man? It's not a real strong argument.
Right in front of our house, and the local jail inmates are the ones that did that. They are the ones that did that, and from time to time we will see them. I have a cousin that works for the city of Mount Holly, and he has to supervise some of these people that are in jail. They're not in prison, but they, let's say, been sentenced to jail for 90 days or for however long. And so the city brings them in. Now, I mean, again, like you just said, are there not that could patch up these roads? Are there not any, private companies out there that do trash pickup that you could hire? Lots of kids out here that's unemployed, that's looking for jobs and whatnot. And it's not, and I get why the prisoners do it, because they want to get out of that cell and whatnot, because it's hell being in a cell, because I've been in a cell before. So I can understand wanting to get out of that, but there's a better way. There's a better way. And so, we have to end slavery. I would rather they be in a classroom somewhere working towards a degree, or working towards getting their GED, or working towards a high school diploma, or learning some trade, or learning some trade skill. But then that's one of the things that they say is the benefit of these programs. I think AA is trying to join us, but he might be having some issues with his webcam because we can't.
How do we do that? Oh, I see. I can give him a high five. Hey,
yeah.
There you go, AA.
Yeah. He's having some issues with his camera. But that's one of the things that Unicor, these other private prison places, and the states and federal governments will say, we're teaching them work ethic. We're teaching them a job skill. But then once you get out and you got that felony label on you, that felony status, then what's the likelihood that they're going to be able to get a job? It's just a shame, man.
Listen, if you have something to offer people that's worthwhile to them, they'll take advantage of it. You don't have to force them to do it. You don't have to threaten them with time in the hole or anything like that to make them do it. If it's a legitimate opportunity for them, they're not stupid, they'll take advantage of it. I mean, that's just crap.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, we don't want to stay on here all night. I have other work that I need to be doing, but we'll start about an hour, go an hour. So we got about 19 minutes left, and we just want people to, ask questions. If you have any questions, if you doubt what we're saying, that slavery was never abolished, well, then present your argument. Tell us why. Show us in the Constitution, show us some evidence that slavery has been abolished, because it has not. Now, another argument, AA is still trying to log you in. I can't see AA, but
I got him on my screen. Can I do anything from this side?
No, because I'm the moderator.
Okay.
I've already added him, but apparently it's not detecting. There's something going on with his webcam. I'm just getting a blank.
He's out of the awesome kingdom, man.
Okay. One of the things, well, I almost lost my train of thought. What was I thinking about there? Yeah, some people say, well, they might try to say, well, the very fact that prisoners are being paid means they're not slaves. See, they have the mistaken belief that enslaved Africans or anybody else, whether they were the enslaved Irish prior to slavery becoming race-based in this country, they are mistaken in thinking that some of them didn't get paid. That's where the term slave wage comes from. It's like if you, let's say you kidnapped an enslaved metal worker from West Africa, which some of them West Africans were known for their metalworking. So then you bring them over here, you know they got these skills. So look, they're working as a blacksmith. That's a highly profitable business during that time period where, you know, everything was but horse and buggy and whatnot. So you want to pacify him, so to speak, or whatnot, and make him seem like, you know, there's some hope I can get out of this by paying him a very small wage of the profits you're making out of him. This is how some of them were able to save up their money and purchase their freedom. Okay, that's where they were getting the money from. Some of these enslavers did pay a small wage to them. So saying a prisoner is getting paid 25 cents an hour or 30 cents an hour, $2 an hour, to say that that's evidence that they're not enslaved. Well, again, that's why I just gave you the history lesson of, you know, prior to 1865, some of them were getting a slave wage. That's where the term comes from.
Well, and once again, let me ask any of our listeners this. Would you be willing to take $1 an hour wage for 8 hours a day if you knew that you would have to be incarcerated for all of those other hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Would you be willing to take $100 an hour if you knew that you couldn't walk outside of the door? If you knew that the people who work around you would decide when you could talk to your family? If you knew that you couldn't attend any of the events that are happening in your children's lives or the rest of your family's lives, would you consider yourself a free person or an enslaved person? Now, as I said to MetaMan 23, I would answer his or respond to his question. He asked, how about we abolish crimes those criminals commit first? And then he said, follow the law and you won't become a slave. All right, so abolishing the laws that the criminals commit, I don't think that you're going to find an argument from most of the people involved in our group when you're talking about crimes like Scotty was talking about earlier, drug crimes, petty crimes, etc. But no one in our group, at least, well, I'm going to speak only for myself, I don't think that people who commit murder, people who commit rape, people who commit armed robbery should be allowed to walk the streets immediately. I think that they should spend some time incarcerated, and during their incarceration, something should be done to find ways to assure that they don't reoffend. But even while those people I think should be in prison for some period of time, I don't think they should be forced against their will to work. It doesn't matter whether they get paid a good wage, a poor wage, or not. They should not be required as part of their incarceration to work. It's simply not, it's enslavement. You know, putting someone where they can't hurt society is one thing. Putting someone where they can't hurt society and then requiring them to perform work is slavery.
Great. I think MetaMan 23 has left the room, I believe, and I think that he was being facetious. I think that. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that he was, you know, his grammar is kind of messed up there, his sentence structure. But yeah, we do talk about getting rid of, repealing the drug laws, repealing the 13th Amendment, or at least repealing the exception clause in the 13th Amendment. And the reason I say that, Greg, because he follows it up by saying, follow the law, you don't become a slave. Well, right. that's typically what we hear, and I don't know what his politics are, but I typically hear those type of comments from right-wing conservatives, the law and order types. You don't want to go to prison, don't do a crime and whatnot. Well, I'm gonna go to one of their conservative right-wing icons, and I'm gonna give you a quote from Ayn Rand. Okay, everybody know who Ayn Rand is? You know who I'm talking about,
Oh,
don't you?
sure.
Okay, let me pull up a quote by Ayn Rand that I like to pull out on you law and order types. All right, let me just find it right quick. I'm on brainyquote.com, where it has a bunch of her quotes. I'll tell you the best way for me to do it is, let me see, Ayn Rand quotes crime. Okay, here it is right here. Now, this is from a right-wing conservative. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. We just had Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, newly anointed Speaker of the House, had this commemoration of the ratification of the 13th Amendment. Now, isn't he always, talking about Ayn Rand and whatnot when he's talking about?
He's a big fan.
All right. This is what Ayn Rand said, a darling icon of conservatives. And she says that the only power any government has is the power to crack down on criminals. Well, when there aren't enough criminals, one makes them. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. And see, this goes back to what Monty Henry was saying earlier about, do you know if you're breaking a federal law right now? And then you followed up. What did you say? There are over 50,000 laws on the books in the United States. And I don't know if those are all federal laws or if that's a combination of federal, state,
Combination.
county law, and whatnot.
Yeah.
So Ayn Rand is exactly right. She is exactly right on this. Is that the government creates criminals by passing laws. That is what they did to the enslaved Africans right after the Civil War by passing the black codes. And not only did the black codes affect enslaved Africans, but it also affected free black people who had never been enslaved until they were arrested on vagrancy laws and things of that nature. What's some of them other laws that they call it when you congregate? Loitering, more than 5 people standing on the corner. Oh, we're going to throw you in jail. And so they were criminalized, turned into criminals, then duly, if you want to, whatever duly means, but then convicted and thrown in prison or jail, and then used as slave labor by corporations. So that's my answer to the law and order types. When they start talking about, if you don't want to go to prison, don't break a law. Well, pretty soon it might be, a new law on the book that applies to something you doing. Like, trying to be annoying on the internet, being an internet troll or something. Hey, so there you go.
Well, and Scotty, I look at it this way too. And it gets so frustrating because you see this on TV, people make jokes about it all the time, and it's so inappropriate because people just aren't thinking. And I'm talking about the jokes about prison rape, okay?
The jokes
That's
about
completely unacceptable. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Prison rape?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought.
You were saying people make jokes about prison rape. We see it out there all the time.
Right. But I'm old and it's late and I've lost my train of thought. You'll have to forgive me, Scotty. I did want to talk about this Monty Henry thing over here. It says Black Americans find consequences of having been arrested can last a lifetime, even if the charges were dropped. And that's something else that, well, it actually addresses what you were talking about earlier with the people who are incarcerated for short stints at the local lockup or the county jail, whatever like that. There are people who are put into prisons who have never, well, not into prisons, but into jails, who have never even been before it, other than to have a bond set that they could never cover. And as a consequence, they may sit in jail for up to a year before the prosecution takes place, especially if they refuse to plead guilty to a crime that they may or may not have committed. And so...
And you better believe they are being put to work. They will be.
Exactly. Right away, yeah. And it doesn't matter if they're being put to work out there making repairs on a highway, or if they're being put to work working at the local lockup. Once again, why are all those positions not being filled by people who get to go home at the end of their shift?
Right, because you have to then provide benefits and, you know, insurance and pay them a livable wage and whatnot. So yeah.
No, I know all the reasons why, Scotty, but it's not just.
Right. Well, I know you know, but somebody watching may not know.
No, you're right.
Right. And so, you know, this is something, man, we just have to reach critical mass in terms of mass awareness and letting people know. Before, let me see how much time we got, about 6 minutes. I was just told, let's take it to politics, to presidential politics. Okay. We're not going to talk about Hillary Clinton's role in the increase of enslavement in this country. We're not going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about Bernie Sanders introducing this legislation called the Justice is Not for Sale Act that would abolish private prisons and jails. Again, this doesn't take care of the entire problem, but it would strike a major blow, because it is those private prisons and jails that are writing the quote-unquote mass incarceration legislation. They are who Ayn Rand is talking about. Okay, we got some other people trying to join us.
Hey, let me cut my microphones off. Hold on.
Oh, two. Hey, here we go.
I'm gonna tweet this out for you guys. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. I'm gonna turn. I got so many devices on. I'll get all sorts of feedback if I'm not careful. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate you guys on shedding some light on this.
Yeah.
This is a very controversial subject, and a lot of people feel uncomfortable with, I think, even talking about it, bringing it up, acknowledging it, because it's a systemic problem in the United States, and it's one of our dirty secrets that we all know it exists, but yet it's like sweeping debris underneath the carpet, the welcome mat. You can trip over it 900 times, but it's better sometimes to go ahead and pretend like it's not there, even though, you know, eventually you're going to break your leg or ankle, and then it's going to be, you know, become an issue. But yeah, I think it's been very convenient for America to look the other way, pretend like we don't know what's happening, pretend like, you know, we don't have ulterior motives when it comes to taking a certain group of people off of the streets, break up their family, use, make sure we understand.
All right, I think you might be having internet connectivity problems, Spy Gadget.
Okay, how's that?
We have audio only, but we can hear you clearly. We just can't. It's showing us audio only. But please go ahead and finish your point. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Let me. While I finish my point, I'm gonna refresh. I'm just gonna go on. Okay. Yeah. You guys are taking a very, very important, very much needed step in the right direction. Because as the articles point out, talking about the criminal justice system, which is at the heart of the problem, it's designed to do what? Give corporate America exactly what they want. The opportunity to exploit cheap labor. Take a certain group of people off of the streets, break up their families, make absolutely sure that we can intervene and break apart and meddle in the affairs of this particular group of people, Black Americans, African Americans. We this is what's happening.
While we do acknowledge that it primarily affects African American families, I choose to use the term Black to refer to myself. But we do know that know that Black people are the primary targets. But we also know that another huge segment of the slavery game is the immigrants that's coming from South America. That's slavery too. And we have to acknowledge slavery in all its forms. Okay. Oh, yeah. And then, right now, most of the focus is on Black males. But the fastest growing demographic of prison slave labor is Black females. Okay. And then, then it's children. And I want to address something you brought up about breaking up the family. See, when you break up a family, you're assuring future generations of slave labor. And so, but we like to acknowledge, and again, it's not that I'm trying to deny anything is happening to somebody worse than it is. But I like to point out that this is happening to everyone, but to a different degree.
Right, you're absolutely right. Look, you guys, understand the guys that are listening. Hi, Leon, and the rest of you guys. This is a serious issue, okay, that's going on here, and until we acknowledge it, until we address it, it's not going away anytime soon. I don't know whether it's going to take some executive orders or not, but it looks like Obama is finally realizing, and trust me, when he pardoned probably 400 people, he decided, okay, look, you guys can put people in jail, but I'm going to show you that I don't necessarily have to leave them in jail. And he used his executive privilege to get them out of jail. But unfortunately, there are millions and millions of people who are still in jail. And this is, like you say, this is a significant Black problem. But trust me, there are white folks, there's Mexican folks, Asian folks. Because of the way the laws are designed, you could be next. You may be protesting, legitimately protesting, just expressing your First Amendment rights. And even though they come pick you up and take you to jail, they typically tell you, okay, don't worry about this being on your record. We're just gonna take you, break up the little party, and then everything's gonna be fine once we release you. No, that hasn't been the case. That arrest, you guys, will more than likely show up on your records from that point on. And when you go get that particular, when you try to get that particular job that you've been, treasuring for so long, and the employer tells you, there's a little problem here, and it dates back to the 60s when you guys were doing your peace and love protesting or whatever, the Vietnam era situation. Guess what? That comes back to haunt you. Those situations, they don't immediately, just expunge themselves. They stay on your record, and that's part of what they're doing to us. Mm-hmm. Bouncing a check,
or even bouncing a check. I can't tell you how many dozens of checks I have bounced over the course of my life, and the only ill consequence I have suffered is having to pay a fee. But we all know that that's not the way it works out. And I want to mention this. I know that we're running out of time, Scotty. Forgive me. I'm going to take just a few seconds here. Everybody think about what Monty Henry said when talking about, and what Scotty said when talking about immigrants and whatnot. When we read the stories about slavery from way back when, one of the things they talk about is families being torn apart and people being moved from place to place. Well, I tell you what, if it benefits someone financially to take someone who is put in jail in North Carolina,
they're going to do that,
in Oklahoma, they're going to do that, and they don't damn what it does to them.
That we all need to be a part of the UNICOR, the renaming of Federal Prison Industries to Unicorn, that didn't just happen because someone thought of a fancy name and they thought, okay, this sounds better. They did that because people were starting to realize the connection between Federal Prison Industries and Unicorn, what their motives were and what they were doing. So they tried to rename it, thinking that, oh, this is gonna throw these guys off, right? But yeah.
we got Double A. Double A, we can see you. Well, we see something in your house, but we don't see you. So
yeah, don't be afraid to come on, Double A. Let's hear some different opinions. I know everybody wants to pretend like, you know, they want to be a part of a serious issue, but let's take it seriously.
Double A is a member of our group. We have a group on Facebook called Move to Abolish 21st Century Slavery, and he is a new abolitionist. So,
oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't tell when people are playing or not sometimes.
Oh no, Alex he's definitely with us. But I think the cameras hasn't moved a bit.
Yeah, the connection is really bad.
Into it, and it's just so. There you go.
Maybe you want to reboot your router or something. I don't know. The connection is so bad. Double A.
Yeah, Double A. That's what it is. I don't know what your package is for your streaming or whatnot. That could be it. It could be other problems. But you're making progress though, because now we see you. We didn't see you before. So we hope to have many more of these. We want to make this a regular thing on Saturday nights. And as I stated at the beginning, there are over 2,000 of us in this group on Facebook, Move to Abolish 21st Century Slavery. And so, you know, when we do our program, New Abolitionist Radio, and we do abolitionists in profile, and we look at the abolitionists whose shoes we are walking in, whose footsteps, you know, we are just picking up the mantle of their work, and we hear about them having abolitionist meetings and whatnot, and trying to figure out how to abolish slavery. Well, we want to have regular virtual abolitionist meetings so we can hear reports like Greg told us, how he was able to, you know, ask Jesse Jackson if he knew about the 13th Amendment and the exception clause that legalized slavery and whatnot, and just explain things and address questions and whatnot. So we want to do this every Saturday night at 9 o'clock, at least for an hour.
Hey, so, you may want to, can I throw something in real fast?
Sure.
It may be interesting to get some law enforcement people in here, like from the police officers. I was in a police officer forum the other night, and they pointed out that when they typically arrest someone, they're looking at least 3 different laws that they can impose upon you, and it depends on which ones they find convenient.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if it's going to be a difficult case, they can use, you know, they may throw that one out. If it's going to be, if they can arrest you using some penal statute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looks like both of you guys are locked up. I do have a working relationship because I run a media nonprofit which manages Black Talk Radio Network, and over the years I have interviewed former judges, former cops, former prosecutors with law enforcement against prohibition. Look them up on the internet. Y'all may have seen Neil Franklin, who is the executive director in Baltimore, commenting on Freddie Gray case and other situations. Neil Franklin is a former Maryland state trooper. I think he was also at one time a Baltimore police officer. And what they want to do is end the drug war. The drug war is the primary means. It's not the only means, but it's the primary weapon they are using to create the world's largest prison slave labor force.
Exactly, that's right.
Double A, see if we can hear you, man. What's going on? Did you have something you wanted to say, Double A? Okay, we're not able to hear Double A. Yeah, his video's still lagging. Well, guys, I want to go around and give each of you a last word. I want to thank everybody who tuned in. I hope that you will spread the abolitionist message and tell people about the exception clause of the 13th Amendment and that slavery was never abolished. But I want to get, I'll go to you first, Greg. Did you have any final comments you wanted to leave before we wrap things up?
I just thank you for putting this together, and technology always amazes me. I'm always amazed that I can participate in anything like this. I just repeat what you say. I hope that everyone will take this issue forward, and you know, it's not going to be the #1 issue for every person, but if it is an issue for everyone, if it's in your bag of issues that you carry around with you, every opportunity you have, make sure that you present that to someone. Let me share one more real quick story. I was walking behind a group of women who work as guards at a jail somewhere. I have no idea where. They were at a fun run to raise money for breast cancer research, and I was happened to be walking behind them, and someone say, I heard them talking about their job, so I knew what they did, and I heard one of them say, well, why don't we go to Target after this is done? And the other one said, well, I want to go to McDonald's first so we can get something to eat. And I just chirped up and I said, well, you know what? It's interesting that you say that, because both of those companies use prison labor. And they all just kind of, you know, paused for a moment and then started talking to one another again. And I said, yeah, I know it sounds really weird, but these inmates are actually enslaved and forced to work for these corporations for no wages. And yet the companies make a profit on all the work that they do. And they just stayed silent. And I think I said maybe one or two more comments, and then I stopped. And I pushed it about as far as I felt like I could. But you know, there's always going to be opportunities like that. It's like you hear people say things like God helps, you know, as it says in the Bible, God helps those who help themselves. Well, it doesn't say that in the Bible. When you say something, when you hear someone say stupid, especially as it relates to prisoners or inmates, work they do, take that as an opportunity to step into that void and say, you know what, you don't. That's
what I call sowing seeds. And you know, Johnny Appleseed. So we want to be the Johnny Abolitionists and sow these seeds of abolitionism so that we can end slavery. You know, again, going back to the attorney who called in to New Abolitionist Radio, who thought he was calling in to really argue a point with, you know, one of the co-hosts, Yohanan. But then when I asked him, read him the text of the 13th Amendment twice, and then he finally caught, that's what does the word accept mean? Accept. So that's a seed. He may become an abolitionist somewhere down the road. He may not. Okay. And he might be on the other side of the line and fighting us. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, at least we have planted that seed in his mind, and now he can no longer plead ignorance. Spy Gadget Reynolds, Monty Henry, right. Go ahead with your last comments.
Yeah, I think we need to bring some of these things into the 21st century. The Constitution, the criminal justice system, the way laws which were put on the books in the 30s or the 40s or something, they were addressing a different type of society. Right now, we have a lot of technology, a lot of innovation, and see the laws pertaining to how I can drive my carriage with the horse and the buggy and all of that. That's totally different, you guys. We're not there anymore. So if a law was written way back then, and I'm trying to prosecute somebody right now in terms of what's going on with them right now, we can't refer back to those precedents anymore. We need to make sure we take those laws off of the books, as convenient as it is to just lump a new law on top of an old law. And then when the poor police officers are out in the field, they're trying to figure out, okay, you know, how do we do our job and at the same time apply these ambiguous laws that may or may not even apply to this situation. So, yeah, let's take a look at bringing the criminal justice system, updating the Constitution, and even overhauling the system if we need to, because right now it's too ambiguous. we're dealing with you know, Supreme Court justices who are admitting that, you know, you can get arrested and go to jail for doing some things that maybe pertain to what was going on back in the 1800s or whatever. But it really doesn't make any sense right now in terms of how we're interpreting those same laws. So yeah, let's do ourselves a favor and just admit we gotta do this thing from the top down, and try to understand the police officers are trying to work with the, you know, the tools that they have, but it's difficult. They literally have to carry an app with the Constitution and everything on their person, so just so they can make sure that they're applying the laws correctly. And people, you guys are becoming more and more informed because you're starting to understand some of your rights, but we really have a long way to go. And let's just keep this in the forefront of our minds and keep making strides forward.
I'll just say this real quick about police. If it was not for the police, we would not have the people in prison that we have now. When we look at in the past, we look at the black codes, we look at Jim Crow, or also known as Jim Crow. There were police enforcing that. Okay. Now, I'm not one to say that every individual police officer is bad, because we have had some who have tried to be whistleblowers and whatnot. Okay.
Right.
We have had some, but as an institution, it is just as much as the problem. It's part of the criminal justice system. And I'll say this to any police officers out there: don't take my word for it. Go to Law Enforcement Against Prohibition and listen to some of those former cops, judges, prison guards who have now figured it out, and now they're doing work to help us undo this damage that is being done to this society. And I will also say, police officers, you do have discretion. And I understand that some of you have quotas and whatnot, but I know there was one New York police officer who took them to court for trying to force him to fill some quotas and whatnot.
Exactly.
You gotta take a stand.
Right.
We gotta take a stand. If not you, who? And if you come across some people and let's say you're writing somebody a traffic ticket because they legitimately, did a traffic violation, and you see a blunt in the ashtray, well, you didn't see that blunt, okay? You really didn't see that blunt. So you do have discretion. You don't have to enforce these unjust laws, okay? And so you need to start being a part of the solution and not being part of the problem. And I apply that to myself equally, okay? Double A, let's try you one more time. Do you have anything to say? I don't think Double A can audio is working. All right. Well, guys, it's been a long night. I got to get up early, like around noon, and that's early for me because I stay up so late because we got some new programming coming on. We're debuting a new program on blacktalkradionetwork.com called Shifting Paradigms, and I'll close it with that. We need to shift this paradigm that we find ourselves in as a society that's still practicing slavery. So I'll close it out with what Yohanan say: peace to the abolitionists, death to the enslaver. All right. Good night.